I had 15 competitive Brawl Stars players vote on the best star power for every brawler. And although a lot of star powers do have their uses, there are 12 that are absolutely must use. I highly recommend watching through to the end of this video because there were actually some star powers that the pros voted on that kind of surprised me, so there's a good chance they might surprise you too. Starting off is 8-Bit, who has a must-use star power. You guys see that this pie chart over there is 100% all the same color, right? That's because all the pros voted for plugged in as 8-Bit's best star power. Do not, and I repeat, do not play boosted booster. Plugged in's the way to go. For Amber, half of the pros voted for Wild Flames, and the other half either voted for Scorch and Siphon or said that both star powers were good. And there's not a wrong choice here, but I agree with most of the pros that Wild Flames is better because it helps her recharge her super and allows for more oil on the ground. Barley has two really amazing star powers to choose from, and you can't go wrong with either one. Now, if you're playing Siege or Heist, then Extra Noxious is the better choice, but Medical Use is an amazing option because it allows Barley to heal without retreating, which few brawlers can actually do as easily as Barley can. My preference most of the time is Medical Use, but there's not really a wrong call here. B-star powers are both pretty solid, but most of the pros agree that Insta B load is the better option out of the two. The shield that comes from Honeycomb is nice, but having a second chance to hit an enemy with a charge shot is incredibly helpful. Now, at the time of this recording, Belle's second star power isn't out yet, so I didn't have the pros vote on them. After playing with positive feedback, I definitely think it is the better option. I don't actually use Belle's super very often, unless it's against a tanky brawler who I want to increase damage for in the future, or if I've run out of ammo, which is why I think that grounded will not be as good or useful as I initially thought. But the shield that comes from positive feedback shields Belle whenever she lands an attack, which is very helpful, especially in close range combat where auto aim guarantees a hit. Both the BB star powers are actually equally good. If you're playing with a teammate that can heal, Batting Stance is preferred because it gives BB so much more survivability. If you're playing Siege, Home Run is the preferred one so that she can pick up that first bolt before anybody else. Other than those two scenarios, you can really just go with whichever one you want. Most of the time, I prefer Home Run over Batting Stance. Both star powers are really easy to choose from. If there's a really bushy map, Circling Eagle's the way to go. And when I say really bushy, I mean like Snake Prairie bushy. Otherwise, you want to play his Snare Bear star power. Now up next is Brock, but I wanted to remind you guys to subscribe for future Brawl Stars videos. Brock star powers pretty much come down to personal preference. If you're playing Siege or Heist, I highly recommend Incendiary because of the additional damage it's going to give. Technically, it does more damage than Rocket number 4 can, but nobody just stands in the flame, which is why you want Rocket number 4 if you can 4-shot the enemy. Other than that, go with your personal preference. And my personal preference is Incendiary. About 1/3 of the pros said that both of Bo's star powers are good, but the other 2/3 say that Tough Guy is the better option. I personally don't think that Berserker is nearly as good as Tough Guy because the meta is so anti-tank that Bull really needs all the additional health that he can get. For Byron, Malaise can be useful sometimes if the enemy's team is running like a healing brawler, but honestly, his Injection star power is so much better and helps Byron a lot in team fights. I consider this one to be a must-use star power for Byron. Carl has a perfect split between his two star powers. This is clear that whichever you choose, it really comes down to your own personal preference. If you want to hit more attacks and deal damage more frequently, then go with Power Throw. If you want to take more cover when you're using your super, Protective Pirouette is the one to go. I personally prefer Power Throw like almost all the time. Both of Colonel Ruff's star powers have their place, but air superiority might be slightly better. If you're playing a map where you're going to be bunched up a lot, then field promotion is insane. But otherwise, I like the additional damage from an air superiority, plus the ability to break enemy walls, which is really helpful in Brawl Ball. Both of Colette's star powers might be good, but Mass Tax actually might be slightly better. I personally prefer Push It because it guarantees 2 hits on an enemy, but Mass Tax can really be super helpful in competitive heists where players are really defensive. Magnum Special might be the slightly better star power for Colt because it allows him to compete with long-range brawlers on open maps. On less open maps, it comes down to personal preference. You could go with Slick Boots, but Magnum Special is still a good choice. Extra Toxic is slightly preferred for Crow in 3v3 matches because it helps out a ton in the course of an entire match. Carrying Crow is better against tankier brawlers and might actually be the preferred star power in Showdown. I actually preferred Extra Toxic 100% of the time. I was actually really surprised to find that most pro players agree that Steel Hoops is the better star power for Daryl. Despite the small window of shielding it does decrease damage by 90%, which is crazy. Rolling Reload might be better for Heist or Siege though, so keep that in mind. There are some crazy experienced Dynajump pros that can do amazing things with this star power, like things that will blow your mind. But Demolition makes Dynamite Super one-shot a ton of brawlers, which is just insane value. Dynajump can be fun, but Demolition is the all-around better star power to use. Edgar's 2 star powers are kind of tough to choose from. Fisticuffs keeps Edgar alive longer, but Hard Landing deals more damage. I personally prefer Hard Landing for Edgar, but this really comes down to personal preference. Fisticuffs can work well too. You can't go wrong with El Primo star powers. El Fuego is better if you're playing Primo in Heist or Siege, and Meteor Rush is better if you're playing him in Brawl Ball. Other than that, it's whatever pick you want to go with, and my personal favorite is Meteor Rush. Emz's Hype star power is the better star power of the two. Bad Karma certainly isn't a bad star power, and it can be the right choice if the enemy team is playing tanks, but the amount of healing that Ems can do with Hype is just crazy useful, and that's why 60% of the pros voted it as the better option. Frank Sponge star power is a must use if you ask me or the pros. The additional damage from Power Grab is absolutely insane, but it only activates some of the time, whereas Sponge is active 100% of the time. Blustery Blow might be a bit better for Gale on maps with lots of walls so that you can stun enemies with his super. Otherwise, both are actually really good options, and I really like freezing snow on maps that are really open. Jean's Magic Puff star power is pretty much a must use. Spirit Slap is obviously the better option in solo showdown, but everywhere else you should be using Magic Puffs. Since Jackie's Counter Crush star power was buffed, it's become more useful, but it's still not as good as Hardy Hard Hat, which gives Jackie a permanent shield. I recommend using this pretty much all the time, although Counter Crush can be solid if Jackie's playing against close range brawlers. Now Jesse's up next, and we're about halfway through the brawlers. If you've liked this video, you can show your support by using code Kairos in the Brawl Stars shop.
KAIROS, code Kairos in the Brawl Stars shop.
Jesse's Shocky star power can work if you're playing it on Heist or Siege because it will bounce more shots to enemies. Even then though, Energize is still a safe bet, and it's definitely the star power of choice everywhere else. The healing it provides is just too good to pass up. Leon Smoke Trail star power is helpful, but it is not nearly as good as the healing that he can get from Invisa Heal. Up to 6,000 possible healing with every super is just crazy not to use, and that's why I consider it a must-use star power, if you have Leon, of course. Loose Hypothermia star power is a cool ability, but if enemies get completely frozen, the effect is reset, which is exactly why Super Cool is by far the better star power to use. Honestly, Loose Super kind of feels a little weird without this star power, and it's a must-use star power. Maxie's Run and Gun star power is better for Heist and Siege because the additional damage is so important. Supercharge is better in Brawl Ball to get more supers, and is honestly probably the better option everywhere else as well because Run and Gun has been nerfed so many times. Creepy Harvest is a cool star power for Mortis, and in the hands of the right player, it is insane. But Coiled Snake is so much more useful in way more situations and is a must-use star power, especially if you're not a pro Mortis player. On maps with lots of walls where Handle with Care isn't so important, Revolving Door can be a really solid option, but Handle with Care is likely the better option most of the time. Nani's Tempered Steel star power is useful, but the benefit that comes with autofocus is just too good. Autofocus allows Nani to one-shot so many brawlers, and all she has to do is fall back a little bit further on the map so she doesn't take damage in the first place. Both of Nita's star powers are honestly really good, okay? We have Hyper Bear is really strong in Heist if you can get the bear on the enemy safe. Most of the time, you're probably better off going with Bear with Me, especially when paired with Nita's Faux Fur gadget. Ever since Pam's Mama's Squeeze star power got a damage buff, it has become the star power of choice. Mama's Hug is still useful, but not nearly as useful as Mama's Squeeze. Now, we still got a few brawlers left to go, but if you're enjoying this video, make sure you guys check out this best gadget video, which is very similar to this one, but for gadgets, right after, after this one's done. Last Blast can be a good star power if you're planning on using Penny's Pocket Detonator gadget. However, Penny's Balls of Fire star power allows you to control the field so well and also helps you predict where the enemy will walk so that you can hit your shots more. Both of Piper's star powers are really good. Obviously, if there's a lot of bush where Piper's gonna be sniping from, Ambush is the better option. Anywhere else, then Snappy Sniping is the one to use. If you're playing Poco and you have 1 or 2 tanks on your team, then you should absolutely go with Takapo. The value it can provide is insane. If none of your teammates are tanky, there is no shame in going with Screeching solo, and it can actually be decent to keep enemies from healing behind walls or even be able to deal damage from a very long distance away because Poco's super has a long range. If you're going to be playing a map where Rico can consistently deal damage after bouncing his shots, Super Bouncy is the better option. Otherwise, Robo Retreat is the better option. But it really comes down to personal preference, so pick whichever you feel like you like the most. Thorny Gloves can be useful for Rosa, but Rosa's usually only played on maps with lots of bushes because her Plant Life star power is so crazy good. In fact, it is a must-play star power, and it's not really recommended to play anything else. Both the Sandy star powers are honestly really tough to choose from. The healing that Healing Winds provides is greater than the damage that Rude Sands provides, but Rude Sands has the added benefit of keeping the enemy team from healing and keeps them out of the sandstorm. This really comes down to personal preference. Most of the time, I prefer Rude Sands. Shell Shock is the preferred star power according to most pros for Shelly. I'm actually surprised to see as many pros vote for Band-Aid as they did, and it's definitely the preferred star power in Showdown, but Shell Shock is the safer choice place everywhere else. You can honestly choose whichever star power you prefer with Spike. Fertilize is the better option if you plan on playing Spike really aggressively, but Curveball might be the better option because it makes it more difficult for enemies to dodge his shots. Curveball can be kind of a double-edged sword though, where it actually makes it more difficult to hit enemies behind a wall depending on the angle you're attacking from, so keep that in mind. Sprout's better star power is Photosynthesis if you're playing Sprout on a bushy map. Otherwise, you want to go with Overgrowth, but you'll probably have a much easier time pushing Sprout on bushy maps with Photosynthesis. Both of Stu's star powers are equally good. I prefer the additional range from his Zero Drag star power, but his Gasso Heal star power can provide a lot of healing. Really comes down to personal preference. 100% of the pros voted for Serve Ice Cold as the better star power for Surge. Obviously in Solo Showdown, this star power is useless, so you want to use to the max, but you'll probably still not likely get very much value out of it, which is why Serve Ice Cold is the must-use star power for Surge. Both of Terra's star powers are actually really good. I personally prefer her Healing Shade, but her Damaging Shade or Black Portal is honestly really great too. You can't go wrong with either option. I was honestly surprised to see more pros actually voted for Well Oiled as the better option for Tick. I've been using Automatic Reload for a while now and just barely now made the switch to Well Oiled. Makes me really glad I made this video. And if you're glad that you watched this video, make sure you guys subscribe for more awesome Brawl Stars content. You can do so by hitting that button that is right there. And now that you've subscribed, you can click right here to watch more videos because this video's done. Oh, except don't forget to use code Kairos in the Brawl Stars shop. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. For now, this is KairosTime ticking by. We will see you in Brawl Stars.